Hey there, my name is Robin Dreeke. I'm the founder and CEO of People Formula, as well as a retired chief of the FBI Counterintelligence Behavioral Analysis Program. I want to congratulate Pete on an epic milestone of reaching 1,000 episodes. That is crazy impressive. I also like to introduce you to his three-time guest today, and that's CIA agent Michele Rigby Assad, and they're going to get at some pretty crazy stuff. If you'd like to hear more about me, you can actually go to my website as well, peopleformula.com, if you're interested in developing any kind of skills and training around building rapport, trust, or organic, sincere, great relationships. As well as don't forget to go to Save the Brave. That's Pete's charity, and click the donate button now to participate and become an active member of his community. And before we get going, I want to remind everyone, look, I'm introducing a CIA officer. So yes, the FBI and the CIA can actually get along. So sit back, enjoy, and have a great show.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Cruz.
This is Bryce Vine.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This
East.
is Sebastian Younger.
This is Daryl
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summit.
This is Dr. Bob Greenberg.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
This is Michele Rigby Assad, and this is the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Yeah, I love being able to bring my fellow collectors on. I say the word spy, Michele, and it makes some of us upset. But here's how I look at this, and I want to get your thoughts. One, it's there is a marketing element to it. It's sexy to say that you're a spy. But two, I look at it from the point of view of the other side. You know, like we can say, oh, I'm just an intelligence gatherer. I'm a humenter. And we can say all these terms that makes our government feel better, like we're not forward deploying people into other people's countries, sovereign countries, even if we are occupying or in some way. But the reality is, if you and I were to go to Mosul, where I worked, and we were going to go out into the field and talk to people, guess what everybody else in that whole region thinks we are? That's why I say it. Is that fair?
That's very fair. And it's funny that it actually makes us like twinge.
Yeah.
And I had someone asking me the other day, another event that I was speaking at, do you want to be called an agent, a spy, or something else? And I'm like, oh, intelligence officer. You know, it's I don't know why, but it's a thing for us. You're absolutely right.
And yet, if you're there with the point of the knife next to your neck because it's all gone south, they would say, this is a spy. And everyone would be like, yep.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. So it's a funny thing that, we struggle to get over. And I don't know. It's just a funny thing that we have this thing. Yeah. The other thing is because again, were you you weren't counterintelligence, right? You were like clandestine operations. Is that right?
Yeah, so counterterrorism and then a counterintelligence specialization towards the end of my career.
Gotcha. Okay.
You know, counterintelligence is a part of everything, especially with bad guys. So,
yeah, and we're going to get more on topic here in a minute, but I just want to relay some of this stuff to the audience because they have no idea what it's like in our community. So, counterintelligence is really just saying intelligence, and you're looking to either counter the counterintelligence, determine if there is intelligence. Maybe you're putting in bugs. Maybe you're sweeping for bugs to see if you've been bugged. It can be a lot of things. And so people...
Great point, yeah.
Yeah.
In my world, when I say that counterintelligence was a big part of counterterrorism, what I'm actually saying is I had to be sure that the people we were working with were not double agents,
right,
or fabricators. So that
yep. This is so good because I'm going to take this the next step, and this is where we get into Berlinery. And as a counterintelligence guy, I'm like, don't forget triple agent, which is not really someone you can trust, but they exist. And if you always want to try to make a triple agent, which is just a double agent that's been doubled again. So these things, it's everywhere. And yet, if you talk to someone who's in counterintelligence, we're a bunch of dicks. And so like there's this little counterintelligence group that I'm in Facebook, and I'll say, hey, I'm going to have some intelligence people on. Is anybody interested? You're going to give away all our secrets. I'm like, not really. I mean, this is stuff that's in movies and everything else. And then
what I love about that, I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yes.
Because people ask me all the time, aren't you spilling our government's most sensitive secrets? And I said, spying's been going on for thousands of years. And honestly, there are so few secrets in the world. We all use the same trade craft. We all know what it is. There's nothing that we're doing that the Chinese and the Russians and the North Koreans don't do the exact same thing. So no, we are not spilling secrets.
The other thing that they do is you'll say, hey, yeah, I mean, I've got quite a bit of time outside the wire. They're like, that's not counterintelligence. And I'm like, it isn't? Oh, okay. Was I not paying attention for an enemy threat? Was I not trying to counter what was going on? I mean, like you said, it's part of everything, but we're such dicks to each other, you know?
That is hilarious. It's true. We're like not we. I don't think I fit in the category, but we tend to be a very grisly bunch of people. It's true. Grisly and hard on each other and hard on everybody else. It's weird. Yeah.
I have to do this a little bit more just because it's funny and it makes me laugh that you get it. So one of the things that counterintelligence people and intelligence people in general will do is they're very like suspicious. You know, they're always like double checking the door. Is this door locked? You just saw me lock it. You saw me lock it. You saw me test it. Yeah. But I have to do. Okay, great. And so they're always hyper focused on security. Don't take my picture. Don't take my picture. I might be out in Cuba operating one day. Like, yeah, get over it. I mean, it's so bad. And so these people will do this. And then inevitably, the people that are like that are the people that never go into the field. And no knock on those guys because they do stuff that I wouldn't want to do. But they are so hyper vigilant. And yet it's like, yeah, I give out my first name. I'm trying to be as honest as I can because I'm trying to build trust. And they think I'm bananas for doing that.
Yeah, it's funny. It's almost like the more hands-on in the field you were, the less of that personality you are, and the further away from it, the more secretive you tend to be. So, I mean, I'll run across people who are so secretive, like my family, like I'll meet someone, they'll say, oh, my cousin, I think is a super undercover secret squirrel agent. And then of course I start to tease out the information. Well, where were they? What were they doing? And it turns out they were TDY and they worked for the State Department at one point. Like, it's a very strange thing. Exactly. Yeah. But the way that they would project it to everyone is so different than the way you and I might project ourselves. Yeah. It's weird.
Yeah. I got called out on that the other day by a professional CI person, but who acts like a CI person. And so I put in this group, like, I would love to talk to someone about our internal electrical network because it's always under attack from, we'll just say the Chinese, but other people. Everybody's trying to get an advantage. And if you're with another country, like we get mad when other countries partner up, but we have a name for our country, our partner countries. I mean, it's no secret. It's called the Five Eyes. And we have so if anybody else dares to work with the Chinese, we get all up in arms and everything. Anyhow, I think it's fascinating to look at our electrical infrastructure and where we get our equipment from. And these are Department of Energy, just as you know this, but for the audience, Department of Energy has counterintelligence and intelligence assets because they're trying to prevent horrible things from nuclear bombs, but they're also trying to protect our electrical infrastructure, among other things. So I said to him, I would like to do this. And he looked at my LinkedIn profile. He's like, you say combat spy. And I'm like, well, I mean, it's true. That's what I did. And he's like, that's what guys say who were trying to get laid in a port when we got off the ship. And I'm like, yeah, but that probably is true. Guys would say that. But first off, and this is hilarious, no one ever believes me when I say this. They're like, come on, that's not true. You're lying. So it never would get me laid because they wouldn't believe me. And two, it's still true. Like, what do you do if you're telling the truth and your truth is just unbelievable?
Yeah. I mean, I hear myself speak sometimes and I think, wow, I wouldn't trust someone saying the things that I say. Like, I'm so suspicious of people, and partly because I've run across so many posers.
Yeah.
Boy, if I had a dime for every person who said every guy were like, I was special ops or I was CIA. I'm like, oh, really? Tell me about that. Yeah. And a lot of times they're not. They're posers. So
yeah, or they're special ops adjacent, where they're there, but they're running the network and never leaving the tent, kind of thing. And God bless those guys. That is not an easy job to be away from your family. And, everybody else around you is doing cool stuff. And you're Joey, the guy that runs the network. You are absolutely essential. You need a TS clearance to do it, but that's where it stops. Yeah. It's funny. Yeah. So the reason why I wanted to bring you on again, you've been on, this is your third time. The first time we kind of just did a survey of you, and John and I asked you a bunch of questions, all the standard stuff. And then the next time was really cool. We had Scott Husing on, who commanded Marines on the ground in Ramadi. And we got to connect those things and have that conversation between the CIA operative spy lady and then the commander who's on the ground. And you guys, in theory, in practice, you don't actually know each other, but you know each other exists. And so we talked about that string between the operator who's, I'm going to shut up.
Where we pass things to them, right? Like it's, so when I would get a hot piece of intelligence, especially in the kind of the threat related type intelligence, we had a mechanism to be able to call up the military, the people who are in charge of that area and get that, location of the car bomb to them ASAP. So we had a great link up in Iraq and it worked really well. So those guys were taking our intel and running with it like constantly. And that's of course what makes a beautiful relationship, because then we learn if our source is any good and if our intelligence checks out and we get a direct response, which a lot of times in the field, you may never get or rarely get, or it's difficult to find it.
Yeah. And I guess in the source's defense, they often are giving you the best that they've got. We have to always question and verify their trust and their performance, but it really can be that something else. I mean, their life is literally on the line minute to minute. And so they may not be able to get you the most accurate stuff. And then we have to also sort of account for it. No, we do. We have to account for, are we burning this person and getting them killed? Like, is this bait and did we just take it? And there are so many considerations that are literally life and death decisions that we can't make a good decision. We just have to make a decision.
Yes, absolutely. You're walking a tightrope. So you have this piece of intelligence about an attack that's going to take place. And like 5 people know about it because there's 5 guys in the cell. And your source is one of them. And you have a responsibility as an intelligence officer, like by law, we can't sit on that information. If people's lives are at stake, we have to. And those are the really tricky moments when you think, my source could get killed. What are we going to do about it? Because if he's outed, or, it's 1 of 5 people. So at some point, someone's going to figure out who was the source, CIA source. So it's a really hard, challenging thing to figure out how to balance your source's safety with getting the job done.
There's a term that we use in the community, and again, this is not classified because you can read about it in a book and watch it in a movie, but you can terminate a source, and there's different levels of terminating a source and everything. And I don't want to act like we're out killing people wantonly.
That doesn't mean terminate their life.
Yeah, you just stop working with this person. However, with the big fat caveat, a lot of times it does equal them dying. We had a guy that was just completely unreliable, was trying to, we determined this over time, that he was trying to get us to go out on things and was likely he was being run against us, right? Mm-hmm. This is someone who, again, I'm a combat spy. I'm not a counterintelligence agent. We figured out this guy, he's trying to actively do this. And so we finally took him into town, kissed him on both cheeks, and let him go in front of everybody. Because that was our termination plan. Now, did that guy live another 20 minutes? Probably not, but
yeah, it's a tough world, man. It's and they know, but to be fair, they know they're involved in life and death stuff. They didn't walk into this as naive idiots. They know exactly what they're getting to better than anybody else.
Yeah. And this is kind of where I wanted to get into. How do we reckon with our conscience? And because you talk about walking on a tightrope, if you've operated in a conflict zone like Iraq or Afghanistan, you've fallen off that tightrope. And if you're alive, it's because there was a net underneath you. Sometimes you fall and there is no net. So everybody should understand that we make mistakes. There are life and death consequences. No matter what we do, we can't control the environment. We can only read what's coming in and try to improve our commander's chances for success. But how do you deal with your conscience, your ethics, your morals when you go do something that is inherently unethical and immoral?
To be honest, I was never involved in anything that I felt like my morals were it was problematic. I had issues where there was a fellow officer in the CIA. Can you hear that? Those sounds?
There's rain going on here. On my end. I'm in a tent, everybody, and there's rain. I'll try to mute myself. I was into what you're saying.
No, I just want to be sure. So the one time that I had a real problem was when I had a colleague that was fabricating intelligence. And so that was a huge ethical question. What do I do? A colleague who's lying. And that's where it was really tough. I never was involved in a situation where I felt like my morals or ethics were being challenged with the way that we treated someone, or we really did go to our sources when we knew they were in trouble. You know, of course, I can't say a whole lot besides that, but we did right by our sources. We did the very best we could.
One of the things that we didn't get right was people who put their lives on the line, especially interpreters, we did not as a nation take care of these folks and get them out. And we left a lot of people behind and knew, you know, I would pass my interpreter off to you. This person's great. You would know, I would know they're not going with us. And it's a horrible thing for us to, as a nation, to go put ourselves in someone else's country, put people's lives at risk, tweak their patriotism to get them to work with us, and then see ya. You know?
Yeah, that is terrible. And as a government, as a country, that is a policy failing. We should have systems set up to support their people.
I'm shutting my tent. It's 1 Andy and cold. Let me ask you a question so you can fill 2 minutes for me here.
Sure. Are you in the North Pole? Where are you, Pete?
I'm in Orange County. It's like the one day this spring it's going to rain. So is that fixable? What is of course, Secretary Assad do, or Rigby Assad do when she has the chance?
Essentially what you do is you have to develop a policy in the National Security Council, and our immigration officers, military, intelligence, you have to work together. But this has to come from the top. This is a leadership decision. This is like the president of the country and his National Security Council deciding we are going to do right by these interpreters who's putting their lives and the lives of their families on the line to help us. But that is a policy decision, and that is doable. And then set up a system that's not so bureaucratic it doesn't work. Because there is a system right now, and it's so broken and it never works.
It doesn't work.
No.
Yeah, the ability for someone to, first off, to find the resource. Like me, here I am, this DOD civilian. Hey, I've got a guy that's got to get out of here. He's going to get killed. You know, he's been a lifesaver for us. And I could literally ask 100 people, and no one would be able to tell me how to get that done.
Yeah. And even if you found the system, or if you found how to apply, they make it so difficult. We in the United States are very good at making things overly bureaucratic and unnecessarily bureaucratically difficult.
Yes, we are. And like you said, the ability for a ground commander at a given level, let's say battalion commander, to say, yes, these 10 people, you can have 10 people every deployment that you can bring home. And I'm making this number up.
Yeah, sure.
To be able to give them that, and if you need more, by exception, of course. And of course, those families are like, not just me, but all 10 of us.
Yeah.
11, because we can't forget the boyfriend. You know, next thing you know, you've used up your whole allotment in one family. And
yeah.
To be fair to the bureaucrats and politicians, it's not an easy problem to solve. Immigration is tough, but especially these folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of them have been out there on the front lines as raids are occurring, and they're going through on the ground with our special ops officers to mine, say, the safe house and find evidence and gather things. I mean, they really do put their lives right up there, and we need to find ways to ensure that we're protecting them in the long run. Because those are very brave individuals, very brave. Iraq, Afghanistan is full of people who have been serving as translators, and we couldn't operate without them.
No, we couldn't. I want to move off of this topic just because I think we've made the point. But yeah, I mean, this is what makes combat and work overseas so complicated. And I imagine this is true for you. I often struggle to watch intelligence operator type movies because they, I watched Haywire the other day. Great movie, lots of fun. Gina Carano goes in and just kicks ass, and is totally believable with someone who's a badass chick who kicks ass. But she's superhuman, like she's all of it. She's the OGA detachment. So she's the CIA will collect information. We have big bad dudes. All they focus on is being big bad dudes. And then there's a whole bunch of other people. If you're doing your own analysis and your own hits as you collect, I mean, come on, it's hard to believe, you know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they do make them like Wonder Men and women in these movies to make them super interesting. They're an analyst, they're an operator, they're a martial arts specialist. They're really good with a gun, and they're a tech officer too.
Oh, yeah. Right. So these things make it a little bit hard because ultimately, if you and I are doing our job right, our job is exceptionally dangerous. And as I've gotten older and reflected on what, I was doing, I can't speak for you. I'm shocked at how much danger I was in all the time. We're literally, there's no amount of force that I could reliably day in, day out rely on to keep me safe. Yes, sometimes I'm with a platoon of Army guys or Marines or whatever, and they provide a bit of protection. But if the Taliban chose to attack us 2 miles from our camp, we'd be attacked until they were done attacking us. You just don't know. And then
thankfully I was not as much in the field as you were in that way. And I'm so grateful to those of you who were, because that's crazy. It's crazy.
It is crazy. I wanted to think about this too, because again, what we do exposes everybody to risk. I mean, okay, let me back up and ask you about this. So when everybody was complaining about Donald Trump, and we're not trying to get political, but Donald Trump and the Russians and putting out bounties on soldiers and service members, I laughed. I rolled. This is first off, not a presidential problem, and it is common. I mean, look, this will shock everybody. We have bounties, and
we're on the list, right? We're all on Iran's. Yeah. I know my name is on Iran's list, the IRGC, or whatever. Yeah. Right. I know. Sometimes you're like, and this is an issue, you guys. This happens all the time. Like, this is what happens. This is why we can't travel certain places. Yeah.
I like to get on my phone and be like, "Yeah, this is Donald Trump. I hear that you're putting hits out and bounties on our people." I am not. Oh, okay. That's it. That's the conversation. Yeah, they deny it.
Yeah, it's a long one. Yeah.
Yeah, we do it. They do it. Everybody does it. We act like we don't, but we paid a big, huge bounty on Uday and Qusay,
of course,
on Saddam Hussein, on Soleimani. If it was an intel asset that got us Soleimani, who's a general in an opposing force, that person got paid, if at all possible. So,
absolutely, we follow through on our word when we say, here's what you will get $5 million if you give us the intelligence that leads to Saddam Hussein's location. We will pay that person. And we did. And we do. So we're very good about our word on those things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But let's not act like you and I don't have our names on a lot of different lists. I mean, I figured I took this as a KPI, Michelle. Like if they say we would like to find out who Pete is, we would like to kill Pete. And I'm like, good, I'm doing my job. I got to be careful. I don't overexpose everybody else.
Sure.
But that means that I'm now communicating with the enemy.
Yeah. Yeah. But you're already on the list. You're already there.
Yeah. Okay. So what I wanted to ask you now, everybody says, like, how do we do this? Like, how do you do it? You don't look Arab. Now you speak, we talked about this before, you speak Arabic, but you speak the Queen's Arabic. You don't speak down home country south, Iraqi Arabic. I mean, maybe you do now, but so yes, maybe you speak the language, maybe you can wear a hijab or something, but how do we blend in? How do we do our job day to day when you're new to theater and you're trying to meet people and blend in?
So this is very specific to my own experience. By the time I was meeting with the source, they were already recruited. So I wasn't trying to pretend like I was part of an Al-Qaeda cell. That's not what I did. And that's not what most people did. However, the challenge came in the fact that I was out and about living in society. And here's the thing that people don't realize. When you are a Westerner living in these crazy places, it is assumed you are a spy until proven otherwise.
We started there.
Yeah. So this is, and this is what you have to live with. And this is what you have to go through day to day. You go grocery shopping and everyone looks at you like you're a spy. So it is a very dangerous job just living in these places. So I felt like sometimes it was more dangerous being out and about than it was when I was actually meeting with the source. So it's kind of weird. So that might correct some myths about how I did my job, but yours was different. So
yeah, but I mean, our jobs.
My Arabic was never good enough to debrief a source or have a full conversation. And this, people understand, like, every word matters in intelligence. Okay. And then if you don't have a native command of that language, you're going to go wrong. You're going to interpret something improperly. And that's why you need an interpreter. So my Arabic was so useful because Arabs are so gracious. Any attempt at the language, they're like, oh, thank you for trying. So you could establish a good relationship with someone because they're like, you care, you've studied, you've been to the region. So for me, that was useful in building relationships, but in an op, that wasn't enough for me.
Yeah, I'm glad you're saying this, and I completely agree. And it's part of one of my my pet peeves that I pull out is that we spend all this time working overseas, and we don't develop, as a nation that deploys, we don't develop a professional capacity to deal with interpreters. We're desperate to teach people a language that they're, great, you can speak Arabic in this little part of the world, but what if you don't go there next time? What if you go to Afghanistan where, they don't say Ramadan, they say Ramazan with the Z sound in it, and you're like, that doesn't follow. I thought we didn't change Arabic like that, but we do.
Yes.
It's crazy. So yeah, the ability to work with an interpreter, and this goes back to one of the main things about doing that and working with a source or identifying a source is you have to establish trust. Even if that source is there and you get passed off and you're now the person, you have to work from a position of trust, at least as far as how I see this.
You start at zero every single time you walk in the door. So yeah, they're technically recruited, but they're scared to death. And I mean, some of them are scared to death and some of them are, uber confident, crazy. But you have to get them to trust you, every officer. You watch an officer walk through the door that they don't like, you watch their body language. They've got it written all over their face. I can't stand that guy. I don't trust him. So it is no small thing to develop the relationship with your source, even when they've already been recruited.
That officer who walks in the door and triggers that physical response near the dude, it's often invisible to that person because we're all so cocky. We're all so arrogant. Our job is ego driven. It has to be because we deal with humans and we're trying to do something that you have to have swagger to do this job. What do you do with that other agent, that collector who comes in and you're like, hey, by the way, you may want to, I don't know, how do you do it? How do you get them to see that maybe that they're not doing it right? That's tough.
I couldn't. I never did. And I knew that I would alienate my colleagues. And so I just did the job, the best job I could. And so what would happen was I would do my job. I would leave the meeting and then that source would keep asking for me. Where is whatever my name was, where is Layla?
Right.
They prefer to deal with you and they keep asking the other person, hey, we really want to deal with you. But you do the best you can. I can't worry about anybody else. I could tell when somebody thought they were a moron, but what am I doing? Yeah.
The other thing you can't do is if you and I are in a meeting and it's my meeting and you're there providing whatever support you're there, whether you're taking, and this is not mean to be diminishing what Michelle would do in this role. We all do this for each other. Maybe you're taking notes. Maybe you're reading the room. Maybe you're providing security. Go ahead.
You are the source handling officer. It's your source. So I'm coming in behind you. Therefore, I can't criticize you. That's not okay. Right. Yeah.
And so basically, if we're in that support role, which we all do, and even if you were the agent handler on this one, you may not be the next one. And if you're fishing, if you're trying to meet people, it'd be my day, Michelle's day, my day, Michelle's day, because we're both learning so much about the environment.
Yeah.
You don't mind having to not be the agent every day. But the other thing is you have to shut up. And that's a lesson that's hard for us agents to do, is to shut up and let it be Michelle's day.
Yeah. Yes. It's hard for a lot of people to listen. And listening is a very important skill in intelligence.
Yeah, it is. Boy, yeah. This is one of the things that makes a good host on a podcast is that I, for the most part, not today apparently, but most part, I try to shut up.
You're a great listener. But, in an operational meeting, there's so much going on. And so if you can have two set of eyes watching a source, not only are you trying to remember and take down notes about the intelligence or the operational details, you're trying to watch body language. You're trying to formulate your next question. You're trying to look for red flags or counterintelligence issues. You're doing 100 different things in that source meeting. And if you've got more than one set of skilled eyes, that's all the better.
You're also probably smoking cigarettes, drinking tea, maybe drinking whiskey, doing a lot of things. And I don't mean to minimize and say like you're out there partying, but if it's a partying kind of meeting, you're partying and you're trying to still do all these things on a minimal of sleep. And then, at least in my case, sometimes very questionable food, and then also maybe eating their questionable food.
And trying not to get sick, right?
Right.
Our little weak immune systems.
Yeah. Yeah. They're like, what? This is good. You're like, it's medium rare pork, man. But okay, let's go. Let's do it. These are things, though, like when you think about, again, all of the different things we have to keep track of in our head, it is great to have a second set of eyes. Are you open to someone who's supporting you? Are you open to them sliding you out or doing anything? Or do you want to just focus?
Oh, yeah, no, that's, and sometimes we even try to take breaks so that you have a moment to like whisper in each other's ear or mention something, because these meetings can be very intense, extremely intense. And so, I always welcome that for sure, because I can't get everything and I never pretend like I'm the best there ever lived, And so the other person's assessment, hey, how did you assess his response? What do you think he was really trying to say? Do you think he was being honest? What did you think of his body language? All of that is so useful to compare notes. And when I was when you're in training, you do those kinds of things. You help each other out and you learn so much more. Iron sharpens iron.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then if the instructor's doing their job, they're pushing you harder than you'll probably be pushed in the field so that you're able to withstand that test when you're actually doing it.
That is absolutely correct. That's their job as an instructor. Push you to your limit, stress you out, and then hopefully you'll never have to encounter that again, that kind of challenge.
When I was instructing source operations, one of the things I would do, and I had to learn this from my peers by doing the instruction. This is like one of those cases when you learn so much by being the instructor, was to get them out of the doctrine. And so like, okay, this is for the audience. When you do a surveillance detection route, and this is nothing classified, the route itself will be classified, but since we're not talking about any kind of operation, none of this is classified. So you take your source and you say, hey, walk this pattern for me. And that way I can make sure that they're not being followed so that neither of us is compromised in the meeting. This is in movies. So if you do that, it has to make sense. So we're doing a meet, and this is all make-believe land, but we're actually in Tombstone doing a source meeting. I'm the Chamber of Commerce rep from Tombstone. And Tombstone, if you guys don't know, does not have a lot of streets. And so to do an SDR there, Michelle, it's, not easy.
Yeah.
But God bless my
places.
Right? Like there's 7 buildings here. How am I going to do an SDR?
The school solution just flew right out the door.
But it doesn't, right? Because, yes, it does. But that agent, it's like, hey, I'm going to need you to walk around behind the back of the bank and go around like 3/4 of the way around the block instead of straight to me. And I said, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And then while I'm playing the role, I'm trying to not think about anything other than the role. And I literally not only didn't do his SDR, I just turned and I went catty corner across the street right to him. And I saw him and I waved at him, hey. And then I was like, because that's what you really do when you're in the moment,
That happens in the field all the time. Your source does a thing you totally told him not to do. Hey, how's it going? And you're like, oh, no.
I put the mark on the telephone pole like you told me to.
Yes. Oh, gosh. There we go.
Yeah. Because they want to be helpful. By the way, that's still not classified. That's just
it's no. I got all that kind of thing cleared in my book as well. And there were places where you're doing your SDRs, and I can't get out of my car because I'm a female, and it's a particular part of town, and if I do, I might get kidnapped.
Right.
Can't do it. You have to decide on the fly what's the best thing I can do right now, and you have to go with it with confidence. So that's why you have to be a quick thinker. That's why they're looking for, when they're hiring people, they're looking for people who can think on their feet, who are not going to crumble at the first challenge, who are going to be able to, there's stress. The adrenaline is just flooding your body, but can you still think in that moment?
Yeah. And you're tired and everything else, the day before you saw a bunch of pictures of dead babies. I mean, whatever it's going to be, there's so many factors that you've got to be able to just, like, when people ask me, like, how do you deal with the danger? I'm like, I've already dealt with it. The moment I put my foot outside of the camp, there's no more time for fear. It's time for work.
Focus.
You know? Yeah.
Focus.
Yeah. How do you do that? Do you have like I know for me, like the moment my left foot lands outside of the camp, I purposely reset my brain, you know, and maybe it's already happened because I'm already ready, but I always like, this is the spot here where like, now I've got to be an absolute pro.
What I think is cool about that is it shows it's an intentional act. And I really believe that to be the case. Because a lot of people say, Michelle, how come you don't freak out easily in chaotic environments? I'm like, well, because I have trained myself and have been trained to focus the chaos out. Focus is your key. So that says, I'm going to do everything I can to prepare for this operation ahead of time, which means I'm going to say, what if this happens? What if that happens? You're going to go through the 100 what ifs. When you get to that moment, that stops. And like you said, probably before that moment, if you get to the point where you're freaking out about what ifs in the operation, you know, when people say they can't take tests because they just shut down, that's what they're doing. Yeah. They don't know how to focus. So you just say, look, I practiced for this. I trained for this. I prepared for this. Now focus on doing that thing that's right in front of you. I have to do A, B, and C. And that's what I'm going to do in this moment. Come hell or high water.
But this is the thing, right? So when folks want to believe that they can do what we do, or people think that it's easily doable, I try to back them off that and say, you have to imagine like we're like professional baseball players. You know, you can't do what we do. You can't play the guitar like whoever it is because it looks
Eric
easy.
Clapton.
Right.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Right. It looks easy because we've done this under the most stressful situations on purpose and developed a smoothness to what we do. And I always say, and I bet this resonates with you, if you were to see me working, you would think I was goofing off, having a great conversation, and likely doing shots. Because if I can get someone to drink with me, I'm at a different level of trust with them, especially if it's during Ramadan, which has happened. So it doesn't look like I'm working. It looks like, and that's the elegance of what I've built in. That comes from me walking around the camp 100 times, practicing lines of questions, you know, and trying to, what I do is I backwards plan out. Like, how do I find out what I want to find out? I don't ask that question. What are the 20 questions that lead up to that? Talk a little bit about that preparation and what that sort of looks like for you so that you know that you're, I mean, and I'm assuming you agree that like when you're out in the field, CIA, Army CI, whatever it is, you've done it enough, maybe not Army CI because we don't get to stay on the ground enough, but when you've been on the ground enough, that you know that no matter where I go, I can operate.
Yes, absolutely. You know, this applies to not only our work, but it applies to real life too. So I have a great recent example from, I guess it's a couple of years now. I had to do it. I got to do a TED Talk. I got to do 2 TED Talks. And you, just like a CIA operation, you practice, you practice, you practice. I mean, you practice 1,000 times. And then when you get to the performance, to the actual event, you can't think about, oh, the audience, oh, the cameras, oh, this. You are in that moment, standing on the stage, simply recalling the speech that you have prepared. Now, here's where the professionalism comes in. It's like, something's going to go wrong, you know, and they always say Murphy's Law, Murphy always shows up. So what do you do when Murphy shows up? If you are so well prepared that you understand inside and out, backwards and forwards what you're doing, you won't get thrown off. So I'm doing my TED Talk. It's probably in the first maybe 4 minutes. My microphone goes out. And, you know, I have this thing memorized. So thankfully, I didn't freak out. You know, there were a couple of people, or 2 people on stage that day that totally freaked out, lost their focus, and couldn't pick it back up again. But I had been so well focused and learned how to do this from the CIA that I just was like, hey, it looks like my microphone went out. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? I guess we need to fix this. I just needed a moment and thought about where I left off. And then as soon as they fixed it, I'm like, testing. Okay. And then picked right up where I left off. And I really believe it's because of the experience that we've had in the field, having to focus under crazy and unforeseen circumstances.
This is a great point. I'm so glad you brought this up because, yeah, it's okay. I have to deal with this. You slow down. How am I going to deal with it? And by slowing down, you're not stopping. Like maybe you fill your lungs and just project. Okay, my microphone's out. I'm just going to project. And if you guys can hear, and then you work through it. And then all of a sudden your microphone comes back and you're like, okay, that problem's, and then you move forward. I was in a soldier board in the Army when I was out in the field every day collecting in Bosnia, and it was for promotion. And you have to recite this creed for the NCOs. So, and it's like, I don't know, 20 lines of text. And he's like, I am the backbone of the Army and all this kind of thing. And when I did it, my mind blanked out. I know this thing inside and out. I've practiced it. Not only that, I performed it. I didn't just read it like a monotone person. I'm like, I am the backbone of the Army, and so it was really good, but I left the line out and I got stuck, and then I was able to regain it. And then I went through, and then at the end, so I'd left the line out, but I gotten the rest of it right. And at the end of the thing, they're like, is there anything else you'd like to add? It's a common question they always ask. And I'm like, yeah, I missed this line in the NCO creed. Boom. And I gave it, and then saluted, walked out and everything else. And then my boss came to me and was like, holy shit, when you did that, it was over. It was over. Like there's no one that they all knew it, but you only knew it under pressure. It left you and it came back. And that I attribute for sure to my ability to go out into the field and be calm and see those truths that are right in front of me under extreme duress of being in a dangerous place.
Yes. Yes. And in fact, I realized when I break down that moment, I still didn't allow my mind to wander off task, because when something comes in from left field and the microphone doesn't work, then you start thinking about the audience and where's your friend, or where's your spouse, or what. You start taking in a lot of data that you don't need, and that data can confuse your mind and confuse your brain. So it's really important in those moments not to let everything else flood in, because that's where your brain gets stuck. And so what? You miss a line, but you kept going. And that's the most important part. Like, you recovered.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things too I do is I take my fingers, and if I hear something, I cross them. And if I hear another thing, I cross them while I wait for my turn to talk. And then I focus on those two fingers, my index and my pinky. And I have a word associated with each one. It's just a dumb little trick, right? But I'm like, doing, okay, now let me ask you this question. Let me, because these are things that I always say I'm listening for something, not like I'm listening to you. I'm hearing everything you're saying, but I'm listening for that thing that I want to ask about, so that I can get into my question stream. Does that make sense?
I love it. That's what makes a good interviewer.
Yes, whether you're on a camera or in a Baghdad cafe or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to get back into source development because, okay, so when you are talking to someone, you have the ability to look around and see people. I mean, I got to go out and, part of what the Army does for all of the agencies is we bird dog. We don't do it intentionally, but we're out looking for the best people. And then you guys can come in and say, hey, thanks for that source. And you take them. And that's awesome. Like, we get upset about it, but the reality is that we found someone good. And we want to repeat that action because you guys have more resources and everything else than we have. And maybe I'm going to be gone in 6 weeks. You guys are going to be there for 6 years, so this is a difference. But how do you identify a source? Like, and I don't mean someone who's going to be good at giving you information because you don't know yet, but how do you identify someone that you want to talk to or build on? How do you do all of it?
I don't know where I'm allowed to talk about that.
Okay.
I mean, you might be able to, but I haven't gotten any of that cleared.
Okay. Well, then let's let me see if I can back us out of anything classified. Okay. Personally, like when you go to talk to someone who, and I'm not talking in a combat situation, just in general, someone who you think might be a good advocate for what Michele does, how do you determine someone who's worth your time? I mean, your time is money. You get paid to speak and all these things. You meet a lot of people. Yeah. How do you assess that? How do you at the convention, you get 100 cards, but how do you determine who you're going to follow up with?
Yes, great question. So you're always vetting. Vetting is such a huge part of what we do. And so the first thing is to figure out if someone's legit. And thankfully these days, there's so much information on the internet. Seeing if someone is who they say they are and they've got a paper trail behind it, that obviously gives me confidence. And then I can very easily figure out whether it looks like it's worth my time or effort. But yeah.
What does it look like in real time when you're talking to someone? You're like, hey, let's grab a drink after this thing and let's sit down and talk and, get to know each other. I'm making this sound like a date, but it's not a date. It's a professional thing. But I mean, how does that look like when you're assessing someone? And again, not in a classified setting, like at a convention or after speaking, and someone says, hey, let's go. And you're like, yeah, I'd love to go grab a drink. How do you deal with that person face to face? Do you have triggers? Do you have red flags or things that you're looking for?
Oh, sure. So I think that as an intelligence professional or former intelligence professional, you start seeing behavioral profiles. So I have enough experience dealing with bad guys and people who are not legit that I kind of know what those profiles look like. Okay. They tend to be fast talkers. They tend to be what I call a slippery snake. You can't put them down on anything. Or another one I call a smash mouth, where they have a lot of big words. They throw a lot of buzzwords out there. They've got a lot of personal connections and they name droppers. When I see that, I shut down immediately, because in my mind, I'm thinking you are likely a truth bender, which is a term I've just put together: liar, fabricator, cheater, whatever.
Right.
I don't want any part of that. So I can spot those guys a mile away and I avoid them at all costs.
So when you find someone, I mean, like you've given me your time 3 different times now. What makes me, and just to give it, this is not about Pete and everything else, but just like what makes you say, yeah, Pete's not a truth bender? Because I make these outlandish claims. I've been to combat 1,000 times, and I've talked to all these people. I've had shots during Ramadan. This is nonsense, but there's a credibility to it. What does that look like?
So that is so interesting to me. What does truth look like? What does it sound like? Someone who's legit, what do they look and sound like? So what you look for is humility, because the most accomplished people don't have to wear their accomplishments on their shoulder, right? When you speak to them, they say things that have depth to them, all right? They're not a fast talker just throwing out a lot of big words. There's depth. I talk about this word called texture, okay? It's someone who, when they speak, they give you enough detail that provides texture to their claims or what they're saying. And so when I met you, I could tell there was depth, there was texture. You weren't trying too hard, because when I see the opposite, I'm like, ding, 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 red flag.
Yeah. That's good. One of the things that, and I forget the exact context, but when we were texting one of the times, I think I noted to you that, I put all last names in all caps in my phone. And I'm like, look at me, and you don't realize you're even doing it. And the reason why I say this, just for the audience, when we write reports and everything, we often use this thing. It's a way of making the last name stand out. Very common across the intelligence community, to all caps for the last name. Yeah. And it's just those little things, those little contextualized moments, You probably can tell that.
If someone says that they were a CIA undercover person and then they refer to Langley, nobody refers to it as Langley.
Right.
That's a dead giveaway that they're a total poser. And I've had those guys talk to me and they don't know I'm former CIA, and they're telling me that. And I was like, oh, dude, you're digging a hole, man. You are digging it.
Yeah. I have very similar things where you just hear the wrong words, or someone could be legitimate, but I lose respect for them. So one of the things that I don't care for is when they say, what rank were you? Or what schools did you go to? Because the school I went to was being fucking deployed, Well, you didn't run sources. You didn't go to Motsi. And I'm like, yeah, but I did go to Iraq and I did go to Afghanistan. So, it's cute.
If you have emotional intelligence that you learn on the fly and on the street, and if you don't have EI, then you'll never learn it. But yeah.
Whenever I hear about EI, I always want to bring up CI or CQ, cultural intelligence, right? And that ability to have cultural acuity, to know, look, like a lot about the Middle East, but you also know that if you go to, I don't know, Raqqa, we'll say, and I'm assuming you've never been there, you would have to readjust what you did in other places in the Middle East, because Raqqa is not Cairo, which is not, any name a city. I mean, Rabat.
Absolutely. So different. I like what Ryan is saying. Yeah, behavioral profiles are essentially how one determines who could be a liar or withholder of information. And I say they're not the final arbiter, but they just give me the red flag I need to know where I need to dig or who I generally want to avoid. I don't have time to deep dive on every single person. So the behavioral profiling helps me pay attention when I need to.
It also gives you that next question that you want to ask. Like, for example, when I talk about my combat mind, like I said it when my left foot hits the ground. When I say that, I can picture my left foot hitting the ground all these times, and so that there's something there. If I don't say that, I'm like, I set my mind and then I walk off the camp. You don't know enough yet. So your question is going to be, give me something that I can color that picture in,
Yes. It's funny I've just put together some training on how to spot a liar. And what I was trying to figure out, besides what are the behavioral profiles of people who you need to really look at closely, but what are the profiles that I just mentioned earlier of truth tellers? And so I went on YouTube and I looked at hundreds of videos to find people that we know legitimately were telling the truth about a claim. And I'm like, listen to how they tell their story. When they speak, they not only tell you what happened, they tell you what they felt as it was occurring. And that's what I mean when I say texture. Now, when you're a liar, you are fabricating information and you have to remember your lies. So most fabricators tend to keep their stories to an absolute minimum because they're not pulling from brain cells back here. They're creating new. So it's hard to remember. That's why they don't tend to have texture when they're telling a story. It tends to be buzzwords, big words, fast talking, and move on.
Are embellishers worse and harder to detect?
Yes, they are, because there's usually embellishers. There's some kernel of truth, or they're taking something and then they're running with it. So yes, they're much harder to detect. Yeah.
But still, oftentimes detectable, just because like they always embellish, probably to the same level. They probably have their things like, I know I can get away with this. They're not going to go for like, I won the Medal of Honor. They'll say the Navy Cross or whatever it is, and you're like, maybe, Yeah.
Right. There's, and it takes a little bit more time for you to like see a pattern with them and then figure out how to confirm or refute what they're saying. Full on fabricators, liars are easier to spot because there's literally nothing there. And they're not particularly intelligent individuals. Smart liars are the ones that do have a grain of truth to them, Yeah. So when you think of like a really well-known fabricator, Bernie Madoff.
Yeah.
He was a king of Wall Street. I mean, there was a grain of truth in the sense like this guy didn't just come out of nowhere and claim to have this amazing financial product for everybody. He was well known. He held positions in Wall Street. He created tech that helped Wall Street run. That was the danger with him. So everyone believed what came next. They're the most dangerous kind. But his actual fabrication about his financial products, when he talks about, he's like, if anyone took 15 minutes, it would have been easy to refute what I said because what I said wasn't even sophisticated.
Wow.
He admitted that. He's like, well, they're really stupid. They could have outed me in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Isn't that something?
Huh. Yeah, that's incredible. You think about what that is. You're going to give someone millions of dollars, and they should be willing to sit down with you for an hour and go through all of it and withstand any kind of examination, for sure.
Yeah, that's why someone like him was very good at pulling out it's a secret. So I can't tell you my special way of making people money on a level that no one else can replicate. So go back to the secret black box. I can't tell you.
Yeah.
So, but you really, when that happens, that's your biggest red flag. Like when you say it's secret.
Yeah. That's like, never mind. I was going to use a strip club example, but let's keep it above board here for this thing. But that's the thing. So when we gather information, and this is how I picture it, I imagine you have a similar tool. When someone tells me a story, I know that I call it tabula rasa, blank slate, right? And so when I'm in a new area or meeting a new person, everything's blank. Even if I've got their bio in the back of my head, I ignore that because what I've learned over time is that I shouldn't trust those bios because they're always pointed to the negative. This person's bad. They're part of the Taliban. They're whatever. Just because the person's a liar doesn't mean I can't work with them. And they might be the only person I can work with there. So
True.
you're stuck with these things. We can comment on that, but also I think of it as a picture in my head. And I look around at my picture in my head and like, what do I not know about this picture? What am I assuming is there? And then I have to recolor those things. Tell me what this was. And then I try to get them in the moment by getting colors out and emotions. And if I can talk colors and emotions, I know I've got someone that I think is worth my time. Does that make sense?
I like that. That's very, very similar. Yes. And the way that I like to approach it is to let them talk. Just let them talk for a while. Hopefully they're not one of those people that shuts down. You have to like pull everything out of them. Most people aren't like that. Let them talk. Let them fill everything out, because a liar is just going to give you so much material to work with. And so then once you've got it all out, then you can go back and, like you say, try to get the texture, try to get the emotions, try to get the details. And then as a debriefer, you can also work them backwards, work them forwards, catch it in the middle of the story. And if you throw them off by changing up your debriefing methodology, then you've got a huge red flag and a possible fabricator.
I might also insert my own detail. I would do this a lot with I tell my interpreters ahead of time. I will purposely ask a question that I know the answer to, and I'll ask it wrong because I'm testing for something. And this is how good I was. My interpreter would be so in the mix with me, they would forget, and I would ask something, and they'd be like, "You know this," and I'm like, "I need you to ask this question." If I had him under the spell, then I know I've got the source under the spell because it's working.
I've done that, and I've had translators go, "Oh, he already told you. Ask the question."
Remember our conversation from day one?
To this madness here.
Right.
I'm asking it again.
Yeah. I even developed like a physical cue when I'd grab them by the arm and I'd say, "Yes, you're doing a great job." And they'd be like, "Oh, right." Because I didn't want to show any kind of animosity. I didn't want to challenge, No.
You want to keep it confident in what you're doing. What is the use of this wonderful question here? From
Both of you have worked in human operations. Would you say the aspect of emotion of telling stories of things they have experienced and being able to engage you with emotional also? I can't read the rest here. What does it say?
Oh, okay.
Also here's the next part. Be a danger. Like, who is the handler?
The question, who is the handler? I had a lot of colleagues that just let their sources run the meetings and we're doing no handling at all. So you let them talk for a certain period of time and then you take control over the meeting and then you direct it as you wish. I just watched so many of my colleagues not do that, never have control over those meetings. And those are the people who basically had a fabricating source for a year. And we put out bad intel for a year that put the operators' lives on the line.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of that.
I'm not either. The willingness to be wrong is the sign of someone who's an experienced collector. Like, I know I've gotten people killed. There's no way to avoid it. I know that I've been bamboozled. I always ask myself, who's running who? Who's running who all the time? And I'll ask, someone who's not as experienced, who's running who? Yeah. And then why, and it's always, I'm running them. Okay. Why?
Yeah.
Well, and it gets hard because it's very easy to be, they're as good at it as we are. That's what you have to assume, right?
Oh, they are. And they're very slick. And I've walked out of meetings with my head spinning and I'm like, what just happened? I'm just not really even sure what happened.
Yeah.
And it takes you some time to process all the data that you've just taken in. You realize he was always in control of that meeting. Okay, so what does that tell me? What does that actually mean? How do I assess that?
This is so good. I love this. This is great. We had someone who was a very inexperienced collector, probably shouldn't have been in the field, but she was on our team and she wrote a report and her job was simple. We were trying to keep it simple. She went and she talked to the females in this village for a while. And I'm like, who ran this meeting? Because I'm reading your report and I see all the questions you didn't ask and all the things that you didn't do. And when I say control, Michelle knows this too. I'm not trying to control the meeting. but I am trying to be in charge of it. If you want to go here, we're going to go there until I don't want to go that direction anymore. Then we're going to go, but you'll never know I'm in control of this meeting because it'll be, if I'm doing my job, it's imperceptible. The person feels like they're just having a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. But you do have to say, now, this is the important piece. Let's get back to this. I really need you to tell me more details about XYZ. They're not the intelligence professional. They don't know all the time what's the most important thing you need. They don't know where you're, so you have to be asking those hard questions and digging in the right places.
Do you ask yourself who's running who? I mean, because like you, I've lost meetings, been like, oh, it's literally either I'm putting them under a spell or they're putting me under a spell. And then there's a third variety where we're both wrestling and we kind of recognize we're both wrestling and it's too hard. And then so I just stop worrying about it and I don't give anything up. But this is not an opportunity for me to engage with this person in a way that makes sense.
So, I've had so many meetings where I initially bought what they were selling. And that's why I was willing to marinate in the struggle and hang with it long enough before I wrote that assessment so that I could really understand what happened in the meeting. And so many times I'd be like, there were so many red flags because the following things were manipulated in the meeting, or he did A, B, and C, which leads me to theorize that. So just because you've been plowed under in a meeting that's not the end of it.
No, it's not.
That is not the end. I probably hung with this one case for weeks before I finally figured out, and it took me a long time. I mean, maybe it would have taken other people a short period of time. It took me weeks to figure out he was a double agent. And I was like, the day that I was like, I think I know what happened now. It wasn't quick. It wasn't easy. That's why I tell people, if you are willing to sit in the discomfort, if you are willing to hang with it, if you're willing to keep going over it and over it in your head, if you're willing to interrogate it and question it, you can learn some really fast. Those are your best breakthroughs. Don't give up too easily.
I call that miscomfort because it's not uncomfortable. You just don't know that comfort. And so you have to learn to withstand it and be in that moment. Like if it takes you 5 weeks to establish trust with this person and the entire time it's uncomfortable, but then you get there, that was the path. There was that is as comfortable as that path gets, and then you get to that trust though, and everything changes.
And I think it's important, as an intelligence officer, to never say I've got this all figured out. You can say, my assessment as of today is the following, bearing in mind, I am uncertain about the following issues. This question wasn't answered. So based on what I do have, this is what I think. So it's very important to be very clear about what you know, what you don't know, what's still in question, what your theory is, what needs to be tested.
Yeah. I also would tell my commander, battalion commander and above, if you see stuff from me and you feel like you want to twist my dial and help adjust my fine focus, you should, because I can't tell. I am in this pin, a stick pin thin silo, and you've got this enormous view. If you need to over a little bit, I'm going to appreciate that because I don't have enough feedback from higher to know how to do. Am I doing a good job, bad job? I don't know. Just continue. And the more they can dial you in or leave you alone and say, what you're giving me is exactly what I need. I don't want to guide you any more than that. That's invaluable.
And of course that's what you need, because you're hyper focused, and sometimes a strategic picture is oh, okay, that wasn't useful, great, I'll go another direction next time. No problem.
I just have one more question. When you're doing this, do you ever when you did this, did you ever sit back and go, oh, I'm a CIA agent in a foreign country, wow, and then get back to work? I probably felt that a lot in my CIA career. I would ask the question, what the heck am I doing and how did I get here? I never imagined this for my life. What the heck am I doing in a war zone? Or, fill in the blank name of country, which I never really imagined. Yeah. Right.
What? Yeah. Oh yeah. My head spun a lot for sure.
It's a head spinnable kind of thing. I know I've beat you up for about an hour on questions. Do you have anything for me you want to ask at all?
No, I mean, it's just so fun to talk to someone who has been through so much of what you have and can understand the how rich it is to interact with another human being on that level and how challenging it is. There's a lot of people who want to sell you information. It is very difficult to figure out what's good. And so I have the utmost respect for the people who do that, continue to do it. It's not an easy job, and you're always learning.
Always learning. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on. These are always so much fun. And like you, I love talking to fellow people that have done this, because it is a remarkable thing to be able to go out into a dangerous space like this and then come out with information that's truly unique. I mean, I can go out to patrol of 40 people all asking questions, and I'll come back with something that's completely different, because you learn how to do it at a level that they can't do. Like, they've got a lot of information, but I've got the best over and over again. And it's neat to be able to take someone else and go down this conversation, because we all have developed independently these tools. Because a lot of this stuff, it turns out, Michelle, it's not in the book. It's just not.
No, I had to figure it out the hard way. And Ryan is right. It's a constant analysis of the source, the scenario, and the space. It is very hard to handle, but very rewarding. That's 100%. Great comment.